A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
Hey there, my name is Kimberly, and I never imagined I'd be sharing this story with the world, but here I am, sitting on my cluttered bed in my tiny apartment in Seattle, still surrounded by the remnants of my tumultuous past, the remnants of people I once called friends. It feels strange to relive it all, but I'll never forget the way betrayal swallowed me whole. You see, I was born and raised in this city, a place where torrential rains could wash away your sorrows, or so I thought. I spent the last 5 years working my dream job as a marketing coordinator at a bustling tech startup. I was excited, passionate, and ready to climb the corporate ladder. I thought I'd found my place among a close-knit team that felt like family. But sometimes, even families can be toxic. There were 4 key players in this drama: Jenna, my seemingly bubbly and supportive coworker; Mark, the charming and ambitious team lead; and Lisa, our director, who portrayed an air of warmth but was a crafty strategist beneath the surface. And then there was me, the idealistic dreamer, constantly chasing after validation and the desire to make an impact. I remember the first time I met Jenna. Her laughter filled the room like a warm glow. We bonded over late-night brainstorming sessions and coffee runs, and for a fleeting moment, I felt invincible. Mark was the golden boy, handsome with a dazzling smile that could charm anyone, including the higher-ups. He took me under his wing, giving advice and encouragement that propelled me forward. And Lisa? She was an enigmatic figure who played the game of office politics like a grandmaster, her eyes sparkling with cunning. But as the months rolled by, the illusion began to dissolve. The very people I had trusted turned into the architects of my downfall. Jenna started whispering in Lisa's ear, turning my ideas into hers, and I, oblivious, celebrated my friend's success. Mark's charm faded to reveal the ruthless ambition lurking beneath. I soon realized he had his eyes set on a promotion that I believed I deserved. I was backstabbed while under the guise of friendship and support. It was a bitter pill to swallow. I felt like the main character in a tragedy, betrayed by those I had once shared laughter and dreams with. But inside that pit of despair, a fire ignited. I knew then that revenge would take on a form I never anticipated. In the silence of my pain, I found clarity. Often, you get your revenge just by doing nothing and letting them fail. And that's where my story truly begins. It all came to a head one rainy Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day that felt like the universe shared my despair. I was sitting in the break room, sipping lukewarm coffee while scrolling through my phone, when I stumbled upon the company-wide email announcing the new marketing initiative. The highlight. A project that was the result of my late-night brainstorming sessions, my ideas, my heart, presented by none other than Jenna, now the shining star of our team. I felt the world tilt on its axis. My stomach twisted, and I could barely breathe. All that hard work, all those hours spent refining strategies and crafting pitches, and there she was, reaping the accolades while I stood invisible in the shadows. I wanted to scream, to accuse her of theft, but the weight of disbelief lay heavy on my shoulders, paralyzing me. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't anticipated. How could you? I wanted to shout at Jenna, who now grinned across the room, basking in the praise of our colleagues. Instead, I forced a smile, feeling a sickening mix of anger and humiliation clawing at my insides. I should have known better than to trust someone who wore her sweetness like a shield. In that moment, I felt more than just anger. I felt a profound sense of loss. These weren't just coworkers, they were supposed to be my friends. I kept recalling our coffee breaks, the way we huddled together during stressful deadlines, and the late-night talks about our dreams and life outside the office. To see that camaraderie stripped away, replaced by deception, left me feeling hollow. The betrayal didn't just come from Jenna. Mark had been there too, smiling and nodding as Jenna's pitch unfurled, as if he hadn't been the one to encourage me to share my vision in the first place. I could almost hear the echoes of our previous conversations, his words now twisted and tainted. "You're going to be a star, Kimberly," he'd said. But now, I realized those were just empty promises, his way of keeping me complacent while he plotted his ascent. Then there was Lisa, the puppet master pulling the strings. As she beamed at Jenna, I could see the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. She had orchestrated this whole charade, pitting us against one another, knowing full well that I would be the one left out in the cold. I felt like a fool, caught in a web spun from trust and betrayal, my heart pounding in my ears as the reality sunk in. They were all in on it. It ignited a rage that I struggled to contain. I felt it bubbling inside me like molten lava, threatening to erupt. But amidst that chaos, I found clarity. This was no longer about them winning, it was about me reclaiming my narrative. In the silence of my pain, I started to plot my response, not with fiery vengeance but with cold, calculated restraint. I would rise from the ashes of their betrayal, not through confrontation but by letting time and karma sort them out. I made a decision that day. I would step back, watch them stumble, and let the universe take its course. Often, doing nothing can be the most powerful form of revenge. I had no idea how long it would take for the truth to surface, but I was determined to bide my time. I would wait for the day when they were caught in their own web of deceit, when their facades crumbled under the weight of their lies, because in the long game, the truth always has a way of revealing itself. And so, I entered this new chapter of my life, armed, not with weapons of anger but with the quiet strength of patience. I would let the failings of the very ones who betrayed me become their undoing. Days turned into weeks, and as I settled into my newfound resolve to remain silent, the tension in the office escalated. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I could feel the undercurrents of betrayal swirling around me like a tempest. Jenna flourished in her new role, basking in the glow of her success, while Mark relentlessly pursued his promotion, leaving no room for camaraderie. Each passing day felt like a slow burn, a fierce reminder of everything I had lost. The facade they wore began to crack, though. It started with small things, Jenna mismanaging deadlines, missing key meetings she had once handled effortlessly. I watched from the sidelines, a grim sense of satisfaction creeping in. She was losing her grip, and the pressure was beginning to show. I noticed her snapping at colleagues, her laughter replaced by a shortness that didn't go unnoticed. It was clear to me that the weight of the deceit was suffocating her. But that was just the beginning. Mark, too, began to unravel as the stakes got higher. The promotion he coveted was no longer a sure thing, and his ego was bruised. I could see him trying to leverage Jenna's success to secure his position, but it only highlighted his desperation. He started to make mistakes, missed opportunities, botched client presentations. The once confident leader was slipping into a whirlwind of self-doubt and anxiety, and it was almost poetic to watch. Then came the project that was supposed to solidify Jenna's position. I overheard snippets of conversations during lunch breaks, whispers of dissatisfaction from clients who didn't share her vision. I felt a pang of sympathy for the woman I had once considered a friend, but I quickly crushed that thought. As she stumbled, the realization hit me, I should allow this to happen. I had spent too long nurturing my resentment and anger. It was time to step back and let her face her consequences. Lisa, the crafty strategist, was the last piece of the puzzle. She had orchestrated everything so expertly that it was as if she were playing a grand game of chess. But I could see the cracks in her confidence as well. A few of our higher-ups had started to question her decisions, how she had favored Jenna over others, and why she had allowed Mark's team to flounder. The whispers of discontent grew louder, and soon she was the subject of scrutiny during management meetings. I could see worry etched on her face, a stark contrast to the self-assured demeanor she had worn for so long. It was intoxicating, the way the universe began to shift. I took pleasure in the small victories of their failures, the quiet satisfaction of watching karma do its work. But there was still a gnawing discomfort in my chest. Was I becoming the very thing I despised? I had been wronged, but now I was reveling in their misfortunes. One evening, while reviewing the latest marketing strategy documents, I received a message from an old colleague, Sarah, who had moved on to another company. She wanted to catch up over coffee, and I hesitated for a moment. But the lure of connection, of someone who could understand the weight of my struggle, was too hard to resist. When we met, she listened intently as I shared my story: Jenna's betrayal, Mark's downfall, Lisa's cowardice. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief as I recounted the events, but there was something else in her expression, a hint of caution. "Kimberly, are you sure you want to keep this up? Watching them fail can be sweet, but it can also consume you. It's like holding on to a grudge, it will only weigh you down." Her words echoed in my mind as I sat in my apartment later that night, the rain pattering against the window like nature's gentle reminder of my own turmoil. I felt a flicker of doubt, a realization that I had started to enjoy this game of sabotage and downfall a little too much. I was losing sight of my original desire for justice, and Sarah's words felt like a lifeline in murky waters. That's when I decided to refocus. I wouldn't let their failures consume me. Instead, I would channel my energy into my own growth. I set out to polish my resume, sign up for online courses, and network with professionals outside my toxic bubble. There was life beyond this episode of betrayal, and I was determined not to let their misgivings define my future. But just as I began to feel hopeful about my next chapter, the climax of my story hit like a thunderclap. It began with a company-wide meeting called by Lisa, who wore her anxiety like a poorly fitted mask. She intended to address the growing concerns regarding the marketing team's trajectory, and you could feel the tension in the room. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of their collective failures. As she rattled off the metrics and pointed fingers at Jenna and Mark, I realized that I had unknowingly become a spectator to their unraveling, a quiet witness to the chaos I had once been a part of. I felt a rush of mixed emotions: relief, sadness, and an odd sense of vindication. They were imploding under the pressures they had invited upon themselves, and I was watching it all unfold, the irony not lost on me. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Lisa announced a surprise restructure aimed at revitalizing the team. My colleagues were in the crosshairs, and as I sat back, a sense of calm washed over me. I had chosen to do nothing, and in doing so, I had let them fail spectacularly on their own terms. But the emotional weight of the moment was profound, and as I sat through their rising panic, I realized I could no longer find joy in their misfortunes. I had become entangled in their drama, and in that blind pursuit of revenge through silence, I had lost a part of myself. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the chaos within me. Was I truly the victor in this twisted tale, or had I merely become a pawn in a game I no longer wanted to play? With every passing second, I felt more lost, wondering whether the darkness of revenge would ultimately consume me. I needed to find my way back to the light, a path untainted by their treachery. I had wanted to watch them fail, but as the tension in the room reached its peak, I understood that the real battle would not be with them. It would be with myself, the struggle to reclaim my sense of purpose and step into a future unmarred by the shadows of betrayal. And so, I waited, not as a participant in their demise but as a spectator, ready to rise from the ashes of my own turmoil and reclaim my life, and perhaps, in time, even my forgiveness. Often, the real revenge is not about witnessing others' failures, it's about standing tall amidst the wreckage and writing your own story anew. There, in the flickering fluorescent lights of the conference room, reality crashed down like a wave of cold water. The meeting was unraveling, and I could see panic seeping into the faces of my former friends. Lisa was scrambling to control the narrative, while Jenna sat fidgeting, her confident facade crumbling with each question posed by our superiors. Mark, once the golden boy, now looked pale and small, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. It was then, amid the chaos, that I had my moment. As I sat at the edge of the room, a silent observer, I felt this surge of power wash over me, a quiet realization that I had longed for. They were the architects of their own demise. I had spent so much time crafting the fantasy of revenge in my mind that I had been blind to the truth. I didn't need to do anything. They were unraveling before my very eyes, and I had the privilege of witnessing it all unfold without lifting a finger. My heart raced as the reality settled in. I didn't have to be the villain in this narrative. They were doing a fine job of it themselves. I didn't need to shout accusations or confront anyone. All I had to do was remain steadfast and watch as their web of lies twisted tighter around them. The rush of emotions coursing through me felt exhilarating and terrifying at once. Suddenly, a wave of clarity hit me. I was no longer living for the approval of others, nor was I the girl hiding in the shadows, hoping for recognition in a world that had turned against me. Instead, I could become the author of my own story, a narrative that wouldn't revolve around revenge but about reclaiming my strength and dignity. I peered around the room, taking in the frantic exchanges, the rising stakes, and the palpable discomfort. A shiver of satisfaction coursed through me, like a spark igniting a flame. Jenna was squirming under the spotlight, her earlier confidence reduced to a mere shadow of herself. Mark's charm was gone, replaced by desperation. I could almost taste the bitterness of his ambition slipping through his fingers. And there was Lisa, the grand puppeteer, now fraying at the edges, her carefully curated image cracking under the weight of scrutiny. Each question they threw at her was like a hammer pounding at the foundation of her carefully built empire, and I found myself feeling a sense of liberation in that realization. I was done being the victim. Instead, I would allow the universe to enact its own brand of justice. In that moment, the decision crystallized within me. I would not waste my energy in futile confrontations or petty sabotage. I made a promise to myself. I would harness this newfound strength and channel it into something meaningful. It was time to reclaim my narrative, not through revenge but through growth and resilience. As Lisa's voice trembled, struggling to regain control of the meeting, I felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over me. I would step back and let the story play out. I would focus on my own journey, nurture my dreams, and rise above the ashes of betrayal. The tension in the room continued to escalate, turning into a whirlwind of chaos. Jenna's voice cracked under pressure, Mark's bravado faltered, and Lisa's attempts to shield them were met with skepticism. I watched with a detached calmness, feeling lighter with each passing moment. All those months of pain, of betrayal, of hurt, they didn't have to define me. The fire ignited within me wasn't a desire for revenge, it was a blazing determination to forge my own path. I realized that the silence I had embraced was more powerful than any confrontation. It was a space for my own healing to take root. As the meeting drew to a close, I knew I held the cards of my future in my hands. I wouldn't be shaped by their failures, nor would I let the bitterness linger. Instead, I would walk away from that room, lifting my head high, ready to embrace the opportunities that awaited me outside the confines of that toxic environment. And so I did. I stepped into the rain-soaked Seattle streets, feeling invigorated, liberated, and finally free. Often, doing nothing is the most profound form of revenge because it lets them fail spectacularly on their own terms. I was ready to let the world know that Kimberly was not just a victim of betrayal but a phoenix rising from the ashes, ready to write her own story, one that would echo resilience, strength, and the quiet power of personal triumph. This was my turning point, and from here on out, I would embrace every moment, not as a prisoner of my past, but as the architect of my own future. The narrative belonged to me now, and I would make damn sure it was a tale worth telling. Now that I had tasted the sweet clarity of my newfound purpose, it was time to solidify my steps forward. I wanted to ensure that while I distanced myself from the chaos, I also took advantage of the situation at hand. I had witnessed the cracks in the facade of Jenna, Mark, and Lisa. Now, it was time to let the universe take its course while I subtly nudged the fates in a direction that would further expose their failures. 1. Document everything. I started by meticulously documenting every interaction, every meeting, and every idea that had been stolen or misrepresented. I aimed to create a comprehensive timeline of events that would paint a clear picture of the deceit. I would save emails, record meetings, and jot down conversations in a password-protected digital notebook. If the time came when the truth had to be confronted, I wanted to have irrefutable evidence. 2. Build my network. The first step toward my reclamation was to expand my professional circle. I began reaching out to old contacts and former colleagues, rekindling those relationships that had faded during my time in the toxic environment. I attended networking events, tech meetups, and industry conferences. With each connection, I gathered insights, advice, and potential job leads. I wanted to build a safety net that transcended the limitations set by my former workplace. 3. Leveraging my skills. It was time to focus on myself. I enrolled in online courses that would enhance my marketing skills, things like digital analytics, social media strategy, and user experience design. I spent my evenings learning and growing, feeling the empowerment seep back in with each module completed. I was sharpening my toolkit, preparing for a future that didn't include any of the 3 backstabbers who had broken my trust. 4. Sideline alliances. I strategically started building alliances with others in the office who felt disillusioned by the rampant dishonesty proliferating within our teams. I wanted to create a quiet coalition, a group of like-minded individuals who recognized the flaws in our leadership. We would share insights and support one another, ensuring that when the time came to voice our concerns, we would do so with a unified front. 5. Subtle seeds of doubt. While I remained outwardly supportive and friendly to Jenna, Mark, and Lisa, I carefully planted subtle seeds of doubt amongst their peers. I'd casually drop comments about how Jenna's idea was great, but I wonder if she's managing the workload effectively, or how Mark's last presentation seemed a bit rushed, wonder if he's got too much on his plate? My goal was to create an atmosphere where their performance would come under scrutiny without them realizing my role in it. 6. Keep my distance, but stay visible. I made a calculated effort to stay visible within the office, attending team meetings and engaging in discussions, but I gradually withdrew from the social circles I once embraced. I would smile and nod, but I avoided the gossip sessions where treachery thrived. Instead, I directed conversations to topics of professional development or industry trends. This created an aura of professionalism while demonstrating my commitment to growth, setting me apart from the chaos surrounding me. 7. Prepare for the big reveal. As I continued this path of strategic withdrawal and empowerment, I began preparing for the moment when I would ultimately leave the company. I knew that when I secured a new position, one that would allow me to flourish, I wouldn't just be walking away, I would be leaving a legacy of quiet resilience. I made a point to have my next job lined up before I took the leap, ensuring that I wouldn't be at the mercy of my former colleagues' machinations. 8. Final showdown. When the time felt right, I was ready to make my move. I would present my findings to HR, showcasing my documentation of their unethical practices and demonstrating how their actions not only affected my career but the well-being of the entire team. I would step into that meeting armed with facts and a strong moral compass. I wasn't there to seek revenge, I was there to stand up for my truth and set the record straight. Ultimately, the plan was never about retaliation, it was about reclaiming my power, my narrative, and my life. I wanted them to witness their own downfalls, not through hostility but through my unwavering commitment to my own success. I found solace in the knowledge that the real revenge was not in seeing them fail but in rising above the betrayals to create a life filled with purpose and fulfillment. I would emerge from this situation stronger, wiser, and with a story that was truly mine. And so, as I lay out this plan before you, I am reminded of the most important lesson of all: sometimes, doing nothing is the most powerful form of revenge. It allows you to reclaim your agency, focus on your own journey, and let karma unfold in a way that only time can dictate. I was ready to embrace my future, leaving behind the toxic remnants of my past. After all, the best revenge is living well, and that's exactly what I intended to do. The day of reckoning arrived, and it felt electric. The air in the office crackled with tension, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface as whispers of discontent circulated among my colleagues. Jenna's pitch had just faltered spectacularly in a high-stakes meeting, and I knew the ramifications would ripple through the entire team. It was time for everything to implode. The conference room was a pressure cooker. Lisa stood at the helm, her face a mask of strained authority, trying to salvage what remained of her carefully crafted image. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh glow on the anxious faces of my former friends. Mark and Jenna were visibly sweating, their bravado crumbling like the walls of a house built on sand. "Let's focus on the metrics," Lisa insisted, her voice wavering slightly as she pulled up the latest sales figures on the projector. With each number that flashed across the screen, I could see Jenna sink deeper into her chair, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the table. The presentations Jenna had delivered with such confidence just weeks prior now reflected a downward spiral, and the silence that followed felt deafening. "Lisa, I think we need to address some of the client feedback," one of the senior executives chimed in, and at that moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. They were turning on her, and I had positioned myself to be the quiet observer, thriving in the shadows as I watched the fallout unfold. Jenna's earlier bravado faded as the questions became sharper, revealing the cracks in her confidence. We'll get it sorted out," she stammered, her voice lacking the conviction it once held. The room buzzed with skepticism, and my heart raced as I saw the shift. My plan had worked, like a beautiful symphony of poetic justice. Mark, who had once walked with an air of unshakable confidence, was now fidgeting, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "Maybe we need to consider a different strategy," he suggested weakly, attempting to redirect the focus, but his words fell flat like a deflated balloon. Just then, I felt a flash of heart-pounding exhilaration as I caught Lisa's eye. She was wearing a strained smile that couldn't mask her anxiety. I could tell she was grasping at straws to navigate a ship that was sinking fast. But I didn't want to be just a bystander, I wanted to subtly contribute to their unraveling, and I knew how. "Can we discuss the disconnect between our marketing strategies and client expectations?" I raised my hand, my voice steady and calm. The room shifted to face me, and I could almost feel the weight of attention on my shoulders. "Kimberly, do you have insights?" Lisa asked, her voice laced with desperation. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I think it's important to reflect on how we've implemented Jenna's recent initiatives. Some clients have expressed confusion regarding our messaging. There seems to be a misalignment in expectations. Perhaps it would be beneficial to address that directly." The collective gasps in the room were palpable. I felt the satisfaction wash over me as Jenna's face drained of color. I hadn't directly cast blame, but I had ignited the spark that would lead to their downfall. Lisa's eyes darted from Jenna to Mark, and I could see her mind racing, weighing her next move. She attempted to regain control. "We will take this feedback into account," she said, a note of false confidence in her voice. But it was clumsy, her bravado was merely a facade, and the tension in the room was suffocating. The executives exchanged glances, murmurs of concern echoing around them. In that moment, I could feel the tide truly turning. My heart was pounding as I watched Jenna shrink further into herself, a shadow of the vibrant woman I had once believed her to be. Mark began to sweat, his earlier air of confidence replaced with a desperate need to deflect blame. "Let's not forget that this was a team effort," he interjected hastily, trying to rally support. "We're all in this together, right?" But the intention behind his words felt hollow. The room had shifted from being a space of camaraderie to one of suspicion and blame. The executive who had initially raised concerns leaned forward. "It's crucial we ensure our strategies align with client expectations, and we can't afford to fail again. If there's an issue, we need a solution, not excuses." The final nail in the coffin struck when Jenna, in a moment of vulnerability, spoke up. "I'm sorry," I thought, but her voice cracked, and the vulnerability in her eyes was unmistakable. The room fell silent as she choked on her words, the truth of her failures weighing heavy in the air. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. This was my moment, the culmination of all my silent suffering and restraint. I could feel the rush of power within me. This was not just their downfall, this was my resurrection. I had fought my own battle, not with vengeance but with resilience, and now I was witnessing the poetic justice of it all. Jenna's tears betrayed her confidence, and as the weight of the moment pressed down on her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation. I was free from the emotional shackles they had bound me with. I could finally see the silver lining, my truth was emerging, and I was reclaiming my narrative. "Perhaps it would be best to reassess the leadership within the marketing team," I added, my voice steady. The words flowed like a river, cutting through the tension. Lisa's expression shifted again, dread creeping into her eyes as the realization of her authority slipped through her fingers. The room erupted into murmurs, and I felt a weight lift. The tide had turned, and I was not just a witness, I was an active participant in my own liberation. As the meeting drew to a close, I felt an unexpected pang of empathy for the broken people I once had called friends. They were crumbling under the weight of their own deceit: Jenna, the opportunist; Mark, the charlatan; Lisa, the manipulative mastermind. Watching their downfall was bittersweet, a reminder that betrayal often comes full circle. Walking out of that conference room, I felt lighter. The rain outside mirrored the cleansing of my spirit, washing away the remnants of hurt and anger. Often, doing nothing can be a powerful act of revenge, and on this day, I had emerged victorious, not by retaliating, but by rising from the ashes of betrayal. As I stepped into the rain-soaked streets of Seattle, a renewed sense of purpose washed over me. The universe had a way of righting wrongs, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace the journey ahead, unburdened and free. The story was mine to tell now, and I was determined to write it in the ink of resilience, strength, and hope. This was my moment of triumph, my final step away from the shadows into the light, and it felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be defined by their betrayals but instead by my courage to rise above it all. The days that followed the chaotic meeting were a whirlwind of emotions. I watched as the company dynamics shifted rapidly. News of Jenna's faltered pitch and Mark's defensive posturing spread like wildfire, and the atmosphere inside the office thickened with unease. It felt surreal, like I was witnessing the collapse of a once powerful empire built on deceit and betrayal. Jenna, who had once filled the break room with laughter, was now reduced to a mere shadow. Colleagues who had once praised her success began to question her capabilities, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. She would sit alone during lunch, her eyes vacant, while colleagues whispered behind her back. The tables had turned, and the very people who had once celebrated her ideas were now scrutinizing her every move. My heart ached at the sight, but I quickly reminded myself that she had played a role in my own downfall. As for Mark, the golden boy's charm had dulled considerably. I could see him struggling to maintain his facade of confidence as he attempted to gloss over the feedback from higher-ups. Each time he walked by my desk, the bravado seemed to fade, replaced by a palpable sense of desperation. It was almost painful to watch, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction that bubbled beneath the surface. He had believed himself untouchable, but the reality was something much more sobering. Then, there was Lisa. She had been the mastermind behind the chaos, the one who had orchestrated the betrayals with deft precision. Watching her at work became a fascinating study. Her usual composed demeanor cracked under the pressure of internal scrutiny as she faced questions about her leadership style. The once smug confidence had morphed into a desperate need for validation, a facade as thin as glass. I marveled at how the tides had shifted so dramatically, and in those moments, I knew I had made the right choice in silently allowing events to unfold. But as I witnessed their downfalls, a strange sensation coursed through me. It was not the satisfaction I had anticipated. Instead, it was a wave of emptiness. I had spent so much time focusing on their failures that I had neglected to nurture my own growth. The irony was palpable. I had become so absorbed in their unraveling that I had momentarily forgotten about my own aspirations. Over the next few weeks, I dedicated myself to rebuilding my life, not just professionally but personally as well. I sought out opportunities that had once felt too lofty, reaching out to connections I had almost lost along the way. I attended networking events, and I signed up for workshops to expand my skill set. Each step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a piece that had been lost in the chaos of betrayal. I began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. The darkness I had once allowed to consume me slowly faded as I embraced the light that came with individual achievement. I was finding joy in my growth, not in the failures of others, but in the realization that my worth was built on my own merits. The final straw came when I was presented with a job offer from a competitor, a marketing firm that boasted an innovative approach and a collaborative culture. It felt surreal to receive that call, and as I accepted the offer, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I was breaking free from the chains that had held me captive in a toxic environment, and it felt exhilarating. Before leaving, I decided to confront the shadows of my past one last time. I reached out to Jenna, Mark, and Lisa, offering them a chance to discuss the events that had transpired. The conversations were awkward and tinged with discomfort, but I wanted to convey that while I had chosen to step away, it didn't mean I wished them harm. I expressed the hope that they could learn from this experience and perhaps grow as individuals. Jenna teared up during our conversation. She apologized for her actions, admitting she had let ambition cloud her judgment. Mark was defensive, but I could see the flicker of vulnerability beneath the bravado. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed defensive at first but eventually admitted to feeling overwhelmed by expectations. It was a bittersweet moment, a chance to offer forgiveness, but also a reminder of the scars that betrayal had left behind. As I walked out of that conference room for the last time, I felt a profound sense of closure. I had confronted the past and made space for my future. The betrayal I had endured had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, armed with the wisdom gained from hardship. Reflecting on what had transpired, I realized that often, the best revenge isn't about watching others fail, it's about rising above the chaos and reclaiming your narrative. I had turned pain into strength and betrayal into a catalyst for personal growth. As I sat in my new office on the first day of my dream job, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was finally free. The echoes of the past faded as I looked ahead, ready to embrace the opportunities that awaited me. Life is a journey that can be shaped by our experiences, but it's how we choose to respond that truly defines our path. In the end, it wasn't about watching them fall, it was about learning to soar on my own wings. I had transformed into the master of my own fate, and in that moment, I understood that often, doing nothing truly allows the universe to reveal the truths we need to confront. And with that knowledge, I stepped forward, determined to write a story filled with resilience, grace, and a kind of triumph that could only come from overcoming the darkness.
Title: Got scammed by someone I thought was a client. Looking for creative, legal, ways to inconvenience him. I never thought I would find myself in this position. The flickering glow of my laptop screen cast shadows on the walls of my small apartment, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background a constant reminder that life goes on even when it feels like yours has hit a wall. It's late, the kind of late that stretches into early morning, and I sit here, fingers poised over the keyboard, fighting the urge to drown my sorrows in another glass of cheap red wine. You see, it all started with a simple email. Just a few weeks ago, I was eagerly typing away in my cozy little corner, fueled by ambition and the intoxicating hope of building my freelance graphic design business. I had just quit my stable yet suffocating day job, ready to embrace the chaos of self-employment and live my dreams. I was filled with the kind of optimism that can only come from being on the cusp of something new. That's when he appeared. A client, or so I thought, reaching out with the charm of a seasoned salesman and the confidence of someone who's used to getting what they want. Let's call him Mark. Mark had an air of success about him, a smooth talker, with just the right blend of flattery and urgency that made me feel like I was suddenly very important. His words were tinged with a hint of desperation, as though he needed my creative touch to pull him out of a bind. I vividly remember one evening, sitting on my couch in a worn-out pair of sweatpants, the aroma of takeout still lingering in the air from dinner. He FaceTimed me, his face half lit by a desk lamp, shadows dancing across his features as he rambled on about his project. He spoke with such enthusiasm, throwing around terms like market domination and innovative branding, and I found myself swept up in his vision. I could almost see the money flowing in, the success I'd always dreamed of. But beneath that polished exterior lay something darker, something I was too blinded by ambition to see. It wasn't until I had poured hours of work into designs and concepts, dreaming of the commission that was to come, that the truth began to unravel. Communication slowed, excuses piled up, and as the days turned into weeks, my heart sank with every unanswered message. It was only after I finally confronted him that the truth dawned on me: I had been duped. Now, here I am. Bitter, frustrated, and left with nothing but an empty bank account and a bruised ego. I could scream, I could cry, but instead, I'm letting my mind wander into darker territories. Revenge isn't always sweet, but sometimes, it's the only remedy for the ache of betrayal. I can't afford to go after him in any traditional way, a lawsuit would cost more than I could ever hope to recoup. But what if I could find tiny, legal ways to make his life just a bit more inconvenient? The idea simmers beneath my skin, a cocktail of indignation and creativity, begging to be unleashed. I'm not a malicious person by nature, nor do I relish in causing chaos for others. But this is personal. And I'm determined to turn the tables, even if it means getting a little creative. So, here I am, ready to embark on this unexpected detour in my journey, trying to mask the fine line between vengeance and justice. The shadows of my living room grow longer as I ponder my first move, and the weight of betrayal settles in my chest, pressing down like a heavy stone. In the weeks following my last conversation with Mark, I oscillated between disbelief and anger, replaying moments in my mind like a broken record. Each time I thought I had reached a conclusion, another memory would surface, and the confusion would only deepen. The way he smiled as he praised my portfolio, his overwhelming enthusiasm, was it all a facade? Did he ever really intend to hire me, Or was I just another name on a list of people to prey upon? I can still hear his voice echoing in my mind, an insistent siren call that now twists into mockery. The hardest part was not just the financial loss, though that stung painfully. It was the betrayal of trust, that feeling of being played. I had entrusted him with my hopes and creativity, and he stripped me bare. My self-worth crumbled with each unanswered email. I felt like a fool. How could I have been so naive? How could I have believed everything he said? It gnawed at me, a relentless itch I couldn't scratch. I vividly recall sitting at my kitchen table one evening, staring blankly at the sketches I had poured my heart into. They were all magnificent, or so I thought, yet now they felt tainted. Every stroke of my pencil seemed like a cruel joke, a reminder of my gullibility. I could almost hear the laughter of my friends and family, the "I told you so" whispers echoing around me. They had warned me, hadn't they? Be careful with clients online. Trust no one. But here I was, painted into a corner by my own ambition and naivety. As I scrolled through social media, I saw his smiling face flash across the screen, promoting his latest venture. My heart raced with a mix of fury and heartbreak. How could he flaunt his success after stealing my time, my energy, and my hard-earned money? It was like a slap in the face, a reminder that while I wallowed in my anger, he was moving on effortlessly. And that's when it hit me, a rush of indignation that ignited a fire within. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I could channel my feelings into action. I didn't need to be a victim any longer. I could be the architect of my own escape from this nightmare. I didn't want to resort to anything illegal or harmful. I wanted to find ways to inconvenience him, to make him feel the ripple of my discontent without stepping outside the bounds of legality. My mind raced with ideas, each more devious than the last. What if I reported him to every platform he was on, warning potential clients about the smooth talker who was really a con artist? Or maybe I could sign him up for a dozen newsletters and mailing lists, clogging his inbox with junk he never asked for. A small grin tugged at my lips as I imagined the irritation creeping into his daily grind, the disruption of his successful life. Yet, beneath the layers of anger, I felt a pang of guilt. Who was I to stoop to these levels? But then I remembered the way he had discarded me, my time, my work, my trust, like a used tissue. It made my resolve stronger. I wouldn't let him off easy. I wanted to show him the consequences of his actions, to make sure he understood that his deception had repercussions. As the night wore on, I could hardly contain the chaotic swirl of emotions within me. Anger transformed into a twisted sense of purpose. My life felt like a blank canvas, and I was ready to paint it with the colors of my revenge. But as my scheming went on, things took an unexpected turn. I decided to start small. Rather than jumping into an elaborate plan, I opted for something more subtle. I registered a fake email address, one that felt innocuous enough, and crafted a message that would send chills down Mark's spine when he opened it. "I've got an interesting proposal for you regarding your latest endeavor," I wrote, mimicking the style he had used to draw me in. I even attached a poorly made graphic that I knew he would find cringe-worthy. Just a tiny inconvenience, a moment of confusion to disrupt his day. When I hit send, a thrill coursed through me. For a moment, I felt vindicated. But then came the doubt. What if he didn't even bother to respond? What if he had already forgotten me entirely? I spent the next few days obsessively checking my email, and when nothing came, frustration replaced my fleeting joy. Then came the crushing realization that my petty revenge had only served to amplify my isolation. Friends began to drift away, their texts becoming fewer and more far between. I couldn't help but suspect that they found my situation laughable. The weight of shame pressed heavily on my chest. How could I let this happen? I thought, trying to reach out for support, but feeling more and more like a burden to those who could help me. One evening, I decided to share my experience on an online forum. I crafted a post that detailed my plight, hoping for support and validation from strangers who might empathize. Instead, I was met with ridicule. "You fell for that? Classic newbie mistake." One commenter sneered, while another added, "Suck it up, you'll learn for next time." Their words pierced like daggers, deepening my sense of betrayal, not just by Mark, but by the world. I felt alone, adrift in a sea of scorn while my own dreams of success slipped further away. Feeling more isolated than ever, I sank into a deeper spiral. I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was laughing at my misfortune. Even my family, who had celebrated my leap into freelance life, seemed to look at me with a mix of pity and disappointment. Each conversation felt strained, punctuated by awkward pauses as they struggled to avoid mentioning my failure. The weight of their unvoiced judgments hung between us like a thick fog, suffocating my spirit. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing hour, my resentment grew like a storm within me. It was a tempest I struggled to contain, and then I knew I had to escalate my plans. I began to map out a more elaborate scheme, one that would demand his attention. I started considering social media, a platform he loved to use for self-promotion. I crafted a series of fake reviews on his business profile. I faked accounts, churning out glowing endorsements that quickly turned sour. I never received the services I paid for. One read: "Stay away from this fraud." Another warned. I sat back, heart racing with excitement and apprehension, as I watched his reviews go from 5 stars to a dismal 2 in a matter of days. Each notification felt like a small victory, but it also deepened my emotional turmoil. Did I really want to stoop this low? But with every keystroke, I felt more powerful. And yet, every moment of triumph was punctured by my creeping sense of loneliness. I had lost friends, and now, I was losing a piece of myself to this dark desire for revenge. The turning point came on an evening soaked in silence and stagnant frustration. It was a Saturday night, or at least that's what my calendar told me. The days felt like a blur of grief and disappointment at this point. I found myself scrolling aimlessly through social media again, desperately seeking the escape I once found in my art. That's when I stumbled upon a video, a heartfelt story shared by a fellow freelancer who had faced a similar fate. She spoke about her journey, the pain of betrayal, and how she had risen from the ashes of deceit to reclaim her power. Her story resonated deep within me. As I watched her speak, I felt a mix of admiration, jealousy, and rage boiling just beneath the surface. Why didn't I think of that? I thought. Here she was, channeling her anger into inspiration, creating art that turned her pain into something beautiful and meaningful. And what was I doing? Wallowing in bitterness, plotting petty inconveniences that would only serve to distract me from my own healing. As her video ended, I sat in the dark, staring at the screen, wrestling with the reality of my choices. I could continue down this path of revenge, but what was the end game? Would I feel fulfilled if Mark's life was thrown into chaos? Or would I only be deepening my own sense of isolation, allowing my anger to consume me like a fire without purpose? That's when the final straw hit. I glanced at my reflection in the darkened screen, and it felt like staring into the eyes of a stranger. I barely recognized myself. The once vibrant artist full of passion and dreams now seemed like a hollow shell, marked by bitterness and resentment. Suddenly, it all clicked. I didn't want to become a person who thrived on the suffering of others. This cycle of vengeance was only going to lead me deeper into darkness. My heart pounded as clarity washed over me, an awakening of sorts. I didn't need revenge, I needed to reclaim my narrative, to rise above the hurt and let it fuel my creativity instead. I thought about my art, my passion, and how I once imagined using it to inspire others. I had been given an incredible opportunity to start fresh, to reshape my life beyond the confines of betrayal. Why not use my experiences to create something that would resonate with others instead of wallowing in the shadows? What if I could turn this experience into a project that not only healed me but could also help those who had faced similar betrayals? In that moment, I realized I had two choices: I could continue to plot Mark's inconveniences, each plan spiraling further into a darker abyss of resentment, or I could rise above and use my experiences to create art that spoke to the pain and frustration of betrayal while also celebrating resilience and growth. With shaky hands, I opened a new document and began to write. I poured out my heart, translating my anger, sadness, and disappointment into words that reflected my journey. It was cathartic. I found solace in the ink flowing across the page, and with every word, I felt lighter. I wrote about feeling duped by someone I thought would elevate my career, and about the dark places my mind had wandered into. I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me as I wrote. I could choose to tell my story on my own terms. No more lurking in the shadows. No more thoughts of revenge clouding my vision. Instead, I would shine a light on my experience, turning it into something meaningful. I decided then and there that I would create a series of illustrations and an online gallery, showcasing with my heart set on channeling my emotions into something constructive. I mapped out a plan that would serve as my canvas for healing. It wasn't just about getting back at Mark, it was about reclaiming my narrative, transforming my pain into something powerful. Here's how I envision my multi-step revenge plan. Step 1. Document my experience. I would begin by crafting an article that detailed my interactions with Mark. This would include chronological narrative, writing a thorough account of how I was drawn in by his charm and then abandoned when he ghosted me, lessons learned, extracting valuable lessons about trust and caution in the freelance world, emphasizing the importance of due diligence before engaging with potential clients. Step 2. Create a visual story. Using my graphic design skills, I would create a series of illustrations that tell my story in a compelling way. Each piece would symbolize a different stage of my experience, from hope to betrayal, and finally to empowerment. For example, illustration 1, a bright, colorful image of me at my laptop, full of excitement as I receive the initial email. Illustration 2, a darker, shadowy depiction of Mark's FaceTime call, where doubt starts to creep in. Illustration 3, a burst of colors representing my emotional journey toward resilience, with imagery that echoes rebirth and hope. Step 3, launch a blog and social media campaign. Next, I would launch a blog and corresponding social media accounts dedicated to sharing insights about navigating the freelance world. My content would include advice posts, sharing strategies on how to identify potential scams and avoid being taken advantage of, empowering stories, featuring other freelancers who have faced similar challenges, creating a community of support, art features, showcasing my illustrations to visually narrate the journey of resilience, inviting others to share their stories through art. Step 4, engage the community to build momentum. I would host a virtual gallery showcase of my illustrations. The plan would involve event promotion, using social media to create buzz around the event, promoting the concept of turning pain into art and resilience, interactive sessions, inviting attendees to share their experiences and thoughts in live discussions, fostering a supportive environment where people can connect. Step 5, public awareness and advocacy. I wouldn't stop there. I wanted to make sure Mark faced some consequences for his actions, albeit indirectly. I decided to take the following measures. Review reporting. I would leave honest reviews on platforms where Mark promoted his business, detailing my experience while ensuring I stayed factual. I would share how he had scammed me without being defamatory, just enough to make potential clients think twice. Networking with peers. I'd reach out to fellow freelancers through forums and social media, sharing my story and urging them to report any suspicious behavior they encountered from Mark. Step 6, channel my energy into creation. Finally, I resolved to focus on my art and my business. Inspired by my experiences, I would create a new branding collection that embodied resilience, with designs symbolizing recovery and empowerment. This would not only serve as a cathartic release for me but also attract clients who appreciated authenticity and depth in artistry. Step 7, reflect and grow. As I delved into this multifaceted plan, I knew the final step was crucial: reflection. I'd set aside time to journal about my feelings as I progressed through this journey. This would include gratitude lists, focusing on the things I gratefully appreciated, acknowledging the support I still had and the strength I found within myself, mindfulness practices, engaging in meditation to clear my mind of negativity, allowing creativity to flourish. As I mapped out my plan, I felt an exhilarating rush of empowerment coursing through me. No longer shackled by anger and resentment, I was rising above the ashes of betrayal. I turned my back on petty schemes and set my sights on something far more meaningful. My heart raced with anticipation, knowing that I was about to embark on a journey of self-discovery, healing, and growth. Climax: the night of the virtual gallery showcase. The night of my virtual gallery showcase arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I had spent weeks preparing, pouring my essence into my illustrations and words. I donned my favorite outfit, a simple black dress paired with a vibrant scarf I had designed myself, a symbol of my resurgence. The clock ticked closer to the hour, and I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach. As the event began, I took a deep breath, listening to the soft hum of my own heartbeat. The screen lit up with faces, strangers and friends alike, all gathered to witness my journey. I glanced at my meticulously curated gallery, a tapestry of emotions displayed in vivid colors. With each image I shared, I conveyed the roller coaster of my experience, the flicker of hope, the plunge into despair, and finally, the eruption of resilience. I could see my viewers leaning in, their expressions shifting as I wove my story into each stroke of my brush. I felt the connection enveloping us, a powerful reminder that we were not alone in our struggles. I noticed a familiar name pop up in the comments, a surge of disbelief coursing through me. Mark had joined the event. My heart raced, a mix of anxiety and adrenaline. What was he doing here? Was he trying to diminish my moment, seeking to sabotage my story? My gaze narrowed as I tried to maintain my composure. As I finished my presentation, I glanced at the chat box, reading a flurry of supportive comments, cheers for my bravery, and encouragement from my peers. I felt a wave of validation wash over me. This was my moment. But then, Mark's comment flashed on the screen like a bolt of lightning: "Glad to see the amateur is still at it. Good luck with your future failures." A hush fell over the virtual room, the atmosphere thick with tension. Gasps erupted as people processed his words. My resolve wavered, but then I remembered the purpose of this event. It was not just about me, it was about those who had faced similar betrayals. It was about showcasing resilience. I took a deep breath and addressed the audience. "Thank you, Mark, for your comment. It reminds me of the importance of rising above negativity. I refuse to let anyone define my worth, especially not someone who has taken advantage of others." My voice trembled but carried an underlying strength that I hadn't felt before. I would not allow him to drag me back down into a pit of self-doubt. My audience erupted in applause, their support wrapping around me like a warm embrace. I could see their faces lit up with understanding, empathy, and, yes, anger for me. The emotions swelling inside me reached a breaking point. It was then that I decided to turn the tides. I launched into a passionate monologue about the importance of community and support in the freelance world, encouraging everyone to share their own experiences, good and bad. I exposed the harsh realities, the aftermath, a new beginning. As the applause faded and the comments began to flow in, a sense of relief washed over me. The virtual gallery had turned into a powerful platform for catharsis, both for me and for many others who joined. It felt as though we had collectively shattered the silence surrounding scams and betrayal in the freelance world. I had expected some backlash, but the overwhelming support from the community filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. In that moment, I understood that my journey was no longer just about getting back at Mark, it was about building something positive from the wreckage he had left behind. I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks, a slight smile on my face as I replayed the event in my mind. I had taken control of my narrative, and rather than allowing Mark to dictate my emotions, I was now steering my own ship. However, I quickly discovered that the aftermath of the showcase held consequences I had never anticipated. The following days were a whirlwind. People began to reach out, sharing their own stories of betrayal and loss. Many expressed gratitude for my courage to speak out, and it was obvious that my experience resonated with far more individuals than I had ever imagined. I felt a wave of responsibility wash over me. These weren't just my struggles anymore, they were ours. But as the virtual high faded, reality sank in. I anxiously checked my phone for messages, but then I did something I hadn't done in a while. I reached out to my old friends, the ones I had shunned in my darkness. I shared my recent triumph and asked for their support, not just in my art but in my journey toward healing. To my surprise, they responded with warmth and enthusiasm. We began to reconnect over coffee and late-night phone calls, and slowly but surely, I started to patch the fragments of my social life back together. However, as I engaged with my newfound community, I also found myself drawn back to thoughts of Mark. It was hard not to dwell on him amidst all the conversations about scams and betrayal. What was he doing? Was he still running his business with the same disregard for others? The darker thoughts that once clouded my mind returned, but now they served as fuel rather than a burden. Months later, I decided to check on Mark's business profile, curiosity gnawing at me. I was taken aback to find my review still visible, a testament to the ripple effect of my actions. The ratings had tanked, and it seemed as if he was struggling to stay afloat as clients were wary of his once charismatic facade. The realization struck me hard. I was affecting his life without needing to directly engage him. I didn't want to wish ill upon him. I realized revenge had never really been about him, it had always been about me, reclaiming my power. It dawned on me that I was no longer the same person who had wanted to inconvenience him out of spite. I was evolving, becoming stronger, and my art was now a testament to that growth. But the twist came when I received a message from Mark himself. My stomach dropped as I read his words, a mix of disbelief and surprise flooding my senses. "You're quite the artist," he wrote. "I didn't realize how talented you were until I saw your gallery. I'm sorry for how things went down between us. I've learned from my mistakes, and I hope you can forgive me." My initial impulse was to laugh at the audacity of it. But as I reread the message, I was struck by the vulnerability hidden beneath his words. It took some time for the